Thank you. Thanks to Stop the War for inviting me. I visited Libya twice over the past 6 months of the crisis. The first time I was on a peace mission, and the second time I was a correspondent for Press TV, and I also did some reporting for Russia Today. I left just after the so-called fall of Tripoli, and I was there during that horrendous week of the fighting in Tripoli. Dan's I think really well contextualized how the war in Libya is a war on Africa, but I'd just like to add something. Dan mentioned how NATO have been targeting the over 100,000 soldiers in Libya, but there were also thousands of ordinary men and women. There were a lot of women who volunteered since the beginning of the crisis to defend their country, and they were armed by the government. And during that week in Tripoli when the fighting began, I witnessed how ordinary men and women took up the weapons that they had been trained to use during that 6 months to defend their country. So I'm going to, as a journalist, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the media, and this has been an incredible media war. Dan alluded strongly to the criminalization of the Libyan government and Gaddafi. So the media said that thousands of people were about to be killed in Benghazi, but they never showed us any evidence. They said that 6,000 people had been killed by the government. Human rights organizations have confirmed that approximately 250 have died from both sides. They said that the Libyan government was attacking its own people from the air, and Russian intelligence satellites have since shown us that this was impossible. They said that the government was hiring mercenaries from elsewhere in Africa. They never showed us the evidence. Instead, we saw the videos of black Libyans and other black Africans being lynched in public squares by NATO's ground troops, the rebels, with scores of people filming on their mobile phones and Western special forces looking on. They said that Gaddafi was hated by his people, but they never showed us the 1.7 million people in a country of 6 million in Green Square on July the 1st, or the masses in Tarhuna, in Sabha, in Beni Walid, in Sirte, and across the country who demonstrated to pledge their allegiance to their leader and to the Jamahiriya. They never showed us the masses, as I said, of ordinary men and women who had accepted the government's offer of weapons to defend their families, neighborhoods, and country from people who wished to condemn them to enslavement, to imperialism. They said they were targeting Gaddafi's military forces. They ignored the 33 children, 32 women, and 20 men who I saw buried in the small and traditional port town of Majer in Zlitan in early August. They said on August 20th or the 21st that Tripoli fell without resistance. But they didn't tell us that in 12 hours alone, 1,300 people were massacred in that city and 900 were injured. They said that Tripoli fell without resistance and that Saif al-Islam had been arrested and captured, and that Gaddafi's compound Bab al-Ziza was taken by the rebels. But despite that, Saif al-Islam himself showed up in the hotel where I was trapped and took a group of journalists outside to see with their very own eyes. They didn't show us the thousands of people filling Bab al-Ziza and the streets of Tripoli waving the green flag on the night of August the 22nd. They said that Tripoli fell without resistance. But they didn't show us that in the 24 hours after those journalists from all the West's major networks had seen that site, that Bab al-Ziza alone was pounded 63 times with NATO bombs. They didn't show us how the brave people of Abu Slim, the poorest area in Tripoli, and the staunchest area of support for Gaddafi, resisted for 5 days until on August 24th, NATO attacked anything that moved and piles of bodies lined the streets. They told us that the country was liberated. 6 weeks later, the rebels have conceded that they won't be able to move their headquarters to the capital. So, Gaddafi, mass murderer, hated by his people so much that they would beg NATO to bomb their own country, hated so much that the capital city fell without resistance. Or NATO, mass murderer, killing the Libyan masses because they would die for their leader, just like in Tripoli. I know which one we have mountains of evidence for. In fact, there is so much evidence that even the Conservative Party's own mouthpiece, The Telegraph, has been unable to hide from it. A resident of Sirte, Susan Farjan, said, "We lived in democracy under Muammar Gaddafi. He was not a dictator. I lived in freedom. Libyan women had full human rights. It isn't that we need Muammar Gaddafi again, but we want to live just as we did before." In the same article, 80-year-old Mabruka says, "Life was good under Gaddafi. We were never afraid." Again, in the same article, another elderly lady says, "They are killing our children. Why are they doing this? For what? Life was good before." And yet another says, "Everyone loves Gaddafi, and we love him because we love Libya. Now the rebels have taken over, we might have to accept that. But Muammar will always be in our hearts." Now all cards are on the table. Leaving the Rixos hotel where I had been trapped for 5 days was the most surreal and probably the worst day of my life. It was a bad day. The safe, secure, welcoming city, full of life and warmth that I had driven through days previously had transformed. It lay in ruins and you could not look in any direction without seeing guns or heavy weaponry. Many people had gone into hiding, been killed, and thousands of others had fled. Libya reached a point, as Dan said, of having the highest standard of living in Africa, a high level of literacy, universal healthcare and free university education, a high status for women in society and the greatest degree of equality for the large black population in the whole of North Africa and the Middle East. Those 40 years of revolutionary achievements have now been reversed.